In this presentation, we will focus on the social responsibility of time travelers in Future's End, a two-part episode from the series Star Trek Voyager, which ran from 1995 to 2001. We will also discuss the ethical dilemmas faced by the character of Starfleet captains Catherine Janeway, played by Kate Mulgrew, and Braxton, played by Alan G. Royal, and their consequent actions. Let's start with a summary of the episode. The episode follows Janeway and her crew traveling through space in the 24th century when they receive a message from a Captain Braxton, a Starfleet officer from the 29th century, whom they are unfamiliar with. He traveled back in time on his ship, Aeon, to the 24th century through a temporal rift to warn them that the starship, Voyager, will be the cause of a massive explosion in the 29th century that will ultimately destroy the Earth's solar system. The rift technology in time ship is a future technology the Voyager crew had not been introduced to yet. Braxton's plan was to prevent the timeline from occurring by destroying the ship before the point that the explosion occurs. The Voyager crew fights back and survives, but ends up hurling themselves and Braxton into the same temporal rift he opened in order to travel to their time. The rift had been destabilized during the battle, and Voyager reappears around Earth in the year 1996. They later learn Braxton's ship had been thrown from the rift of the year 1967. Four members of the Voyager crew, Janeway, Commander Chakotay, played by Robert Beltran, Lieutenant Tuvok, played by Tim Russ, and Ensign Tom Paris, played by Robert Duncan McNeil, beamed to 1996 Santa Monica to search for Braxton and their time ship in order to correct the timeline before too many changes were made to pre-warp technology Earth. They discover Braxton as an old homeless man in the time ship to be in possession of multimillionaire industrialist Henry Starling, played by Ed Begley Jr. Starling had discovered the abandoned time ship in 1969 and had exploited its technologies to gain international prestige and a corporate technology empire. Among the technologies he stole and marketed as his own were the first microchips. The Voyager away team splits up into two groups, Janeway and Chakotay to retrieve the time ship and find Braxton, Tom and Tuvok to find the origin of the welcome message Voyager had intercepted from the planet's surface. They need to ensure Voyager had not been detected in orbit around the planet while they were trapped in the past. Tom and Tuvok's search leads them to the Griffith Observatory to an astronomer named Rain, played by Sarah Silverman, who has been hired by Starling to alert him any signals matching the time ships. Rain agrees to help Tom and Tuvok take Starling down and rescue the ship's holographic doctor, only referred to as the Doctor, played by Robert Picardo, who was downloading into Starling's system after Starling hacked into Voyager's computers. The Doctor's program is transferred into a mobile holo emitter, technology from the time ships that was also unknown to the Voyager crew. Previously, the Doctor was limited to a roaming room with built-in emitters like Voyager's sickbay and the holodeck. The mobile emitter gives the Doctors a level of freedom he had never had access to before. The Voyager away team soon learns of Starling's plan to use the time ship to travel to the future far beyond his own 20th century time to steal more technology to introduce to the world before its time. They discover the explosion that destroys the 29th century's Earth's solar system was actually caused by Starling attempting to pilot a damaged time ship through an unstable rift and warn him of the consequences his actions will have. He is unaffected, voicing that he only cares for his own time and prosperity. The Voyager crew has no choice but to destroy him and the ship along with it before it enters the rift, thus preventing the timeline in which the explosion in the 29th century occurs. They are then contacted by the new timeline's Braxton, who did not experience the past 30 years on Earth in the 20th century and opens a temporal rift back to the 24th century. They go back to their own time and continue on their original mission. They request that Braxton open and exit the end of the rift near Earth and not where they were originally transported from. The series focuses on their journey back to Earth after being stranded 700,000 light-years away. Braxton refuses, saying that this would alter decades of the timeline and affect millions of people Voyager interacts with along their route home. The effect of this episode's time traveling are technology Starling managed to leak between 1969 and 1996, the lack of a solar system destroying explosion, and Voyager's gain of the Doctor Halo emitter. Now we will discuss the time-altering choices the characters made in detail and provide our analysis of their ethics, or lack thereof, behind them. In this case, the crew operates under a set of guidelines passed down through the Federation, and these rules serve as their ethical and moral compass. One of the most serious and strict rules is to never interfere with a culture that hasn't yet developed warp technology. Earth in the 20th century qualifies as an undeveloped world according to their guidelines. In plain terms, it is wrong to help a culture or society progress to warp technology before it is ready, because a society has to first be ready as a whole to accept the existence and sovereignty of alien races and worlds. At the beginning of the episode, Janeway refuses to allow Braxton to destroy her ship and kill her crew, even though she is led to believe this could save millions in the future. She considers the dilemma before her and chooses her responsibility to her crew over the possibility of saving others. This unwavering loyalty to her crew is a pillar of Janeway's character throughout the series, and one that often determines the outcome of the episode. Given the choice, we believe that she made the correct one, as Janeway has no way of verifying what Braxton says is truth. Once she is made aware of the explosion, she felt that her and Braxton could partner to take action to prevent it without sacrificing her crew. We learn later that it was not Voyager's fault at all, it was Braxton's, because he allowed Starling to gain control of the starship by opening the temporal rift to destroy Voyager in the first place. Braxton caused the explosion by traveling back in time to prevent it. Therefore, the natural timeline was actually one that existed without an explosion and with Voyager still existing. It was right to prevent the explosion without destroying Voyager in its process. Voyager's subsequent time travel to the 20th century was forced upon the crew and only beamed down back to the planet's surface in order to locate Braxton, the time ship, and thus find a way back to their own timeline. Had they abandoned that task, destroyed Voyager, and prevented its discovery and integrated themselves into Earth's population, they would have interacted and affected far more 20th century people than they did by trying to find a way home instead. The next questionable choice was made by Tuvok and Tom's decision to include Rain in their attempt to thwart Starling. Taking Rain with them risks the exposure of themselves as time travelers, but leaving her of the observatory meant risking information about them being leaked and having jeopardized their mission to recover the time machine. Neither was a perfect choice, but they decided to go with the option that posed the least damage overall, choosing their mission to get home as of greater importance than protecting their identity from a single person. Again, this was a reasonable choice, as Rain had already discovered Voyager in orbit before she met any of the Voyager crew, and she knew that what she discovered was not of this world. Taking her with them was also prevented Starling from killing her, as he had already sent an assassin to silence her. Saving her life actually kept the natural timeline intact, because her life was only at risk due to Voyager's appearance in the Earth's stratosphere. Tuvok and Tom kept the true nature of their identities from her, but she figured they were from another time on her own. She proved to be a valuable companion and was understanding when they refused to take her with them in their time in the future, although Tom was tempted. Next, we look at Janeway's choice to kill Starling to prevent the explosion, which was when she was not willing to make the same sacrifice for her crew and the exact same reason. She was justified as she had just enough information to know the devastating effect Starling's travel to the future world would have. She also knew his access to the time ship was never supposed to have happened. If Starling could have traveled successfully to the future without causing millions of deaths, Janeway still had a responsibility to keep Starling from stealing and introducing new technologies to human society thousands of years too early. He had already altered Earth's technology's progress since 1969. The biggest reason for stopping him was that giving Earth warp technology, the technology all futuristic starships used to travel far distances quickly, too early would mean the earlier encounters with alien races. The Federation, which is the alliance of space-faring species, would avoid any planet before it develops warp technology. Allowing Earth to come into its warp age before its natural time would impact billions of lives. The effects would be unpredictable, and there is no way of telling how many lives would cease or exist differently. Janeway had to consider all those effects before deciding one life lost is a better option than millions of unpredictable changes. She did, however, offer to beam Starling aboard Voyager and return him to Earth if he aborted flight and closed the temporal rift he opened. He refused. The choice to die was Starling's. At the end of the episode, Janeway decided to allow the Doctor to keep his mobile halo emitter, which was a 29th century technology that did not yet exist in the 24th century. This choice is both reasonable and still unethical. The Doctor's ability to move about freely, even outside the Voyager's boundaries, is paramount to the crew's survival in future episodes. Therefore, you could say keeping this technology significantly altered the natural timeline by keeping the crew alive when they would have otherwise died. The only defense to this choice is that Janeway also staunchly refused to share their technology with any races they encountered along the journey home, and thus kept the emitter's future technology contained and restricted to the Voyager crew. Remember, we mentioned before the number one guiding principle Janeway operated with was a responsibility to keeping her crew alive. She also had a very strict moral code set by the Federation throughout the series. She never intentionally harmed another species, even at the risk of her crew, meaning they did not steal or cause death unless they were defending themselves or were fired upon first. She did welcome the introduction of useful technologies to her ship as she encountered them, though, and this was allowable because Starfleet's main mission was that the exploration of the final decision we will discuss restored the timeline's new Braxton refusal to return to Voyager close to Earth in the 24th century. Voyager was still about 50 years' worth of travel away from home on Earth when they were sucked into the 20th century. Although they eventually lowered their total time home to 27 years, those years were spent affecting the species they encountered, discovering and adapting new technologies, and charting previously unknown sections of space. Those years of experience and things learned would not have otherwise occurred had Voyager reappeared in their time close to home. It is likely that much of the information they brought home after their 27-year-long journey affected the 29th century and the path of development human society took during those 500 years in between. Janeway had to make a choice to save one or to save many. Neither option is without merit or detriment. In this case, Janeway attempted to save all people first, waiting until the final moment possible before issuing a death sentence. When Starling refused, she was forced into the position to choose death for one or millions. She chose to kill a single man, who in this case was warned he had been given the chance to turn off the time machine and return it. Janeway did not consider his death a victory, and she certainly did not make her choice lightly. Time travel only complicated the issue because had the time machine never crashed in the past, Sterling would have never been killed by Voyager. However, Janeway believed she had a responsibility to try to set his timeline back to rights as she understood it. And that was to ensure Starling never used the time machine to jump to the future to steal technology that Earth was not yet ready for. This episode has significance as a time travel narrative because it features multiple choices made regarding time travel, some ethical and responsible and some not, and glimpses of what can happen when time traveling creates alternate timelines. Time travel is a common theme in the episodes of Star Trek Voyager, one that keeps the storyline interesting and allowed it to explore political and social situations, such as justifiable espionage and actions against one's own nation, personal relationships, diplomacy between different races, which we can read as between different nationalities in reality, and the meaning of morality and how it can differ based upon cultural influences. In nearly every one of the time travel episodes, the writers ensured negative consequences accompanied actions they considered unethical and rewarded those which would be considered reasonable and justified.